Welcome to ETV Town Talk. I'm your host today, Rob Gilligan. With me, my guests from the Mental Health Center of East Central Kansas are Brian Muench, the Director of Outpatient Emergency Services, and Amanda Cunningham, who is the Quality Risk Manager at the Mental Health Center. So thanks for being on the show today.
Thanks for having us.
We appreciate you guys coming on and taking some time out of your busy schedules. I'm sure that you guys are constantly busy with all kinds of different things. With a 7-county area, there's a lot of space that you guys have to cover to offer the services you do. So I'll first say I appreciate that. Today, obviously, we brought you in lots of activity in the news recently with traumatic events and experiences that spill in, and the discussion happens. Probably, unfortunately, the discussion that needs to happen more often about the necessity of mental health services only happens when there's a tragedy that demands those services or makes the awareness of it. But I want to have you guys come in and talk a little bit about Mental Health Center here in Emporia, serving this area, the services that you guys offer, and maybe talk a little bit about how we prepare for emergency traumatic situations and what you guys offer. So I'll let Brian kind of start and give us the overview of the Mental Health Center, if you don't mind, and what services you provide to our community.
Okay. The Mental Health Center has been around for over 50 years now in this community. And like you said, we serve the 7-county area. Morris, Osage will run the Chase, Coffee, Lyon County, and Osage. So primary services we work with is individual therapy, family therapy. We provide case management to families with severe and emotionally disturbed children. We have case management services for adults that are chronically mentally ill. We also provide some support services like peer support, which is a peer-to-peer help for the adult clients. We have attending care services to provide some additional support to families that might need a break or need to de-stress. We have a medication clinic to deal with medication issues, psychotropic medications. What other services?
Emergency services.
Emergency services. 24 hours a day, we have someone on call available for screenings for those who are high risk, a danger to self or others. We have crisis case management services to help, and a crisis attendant care to help with those supports as well for people that are in immediate crisis.
Great. Maybe you could talk a little bit about, sometimes there's the chat about the stigma of mental health, that mental health is part of our healthcare system, and just as much as you can injure your elbow or injure your knee, you can injure your psyche and your emotions as well. Talk a little bit about how do we overcome, or what are some of the things we can do to help people overcome that stigma and seek out that help that they may need?
Well, first of all, as a society, we need to understand some facts about mental health. The stigma comes from movies, media, portrayal of kind of these traumatic events that bring it to the forefront. And so what we know is that schizophrenia is kind of the diagnosis, or a psychotic diagnosis, that people really look at and make that stigma and base that stigma upon. And that really only affects about 1% of our population. And so the first kind of educated fact people need to know is that is very rare that an individual suffers from that degree of mental illness. And so just to further that and understand that and take away some of those negative connotations related to mental health. I mean, what we do know is most of us experience some sort of symptom related to a mental illness. We may not have a disorder, but we've all felt depressed or anxious or angry or any of those things. And so we just need to understand and be empathetic to those feelings and those symptoms.
The other stigma I think that emerges from a situation like this is this somewhat of the stereotype that mentally ill people are more likely to be violent. And that certainly is not true with statistics, and not true in our experience. If anything, people may have more of a danger to themselves, but they tend to be more rare that they're actually a danger to other people because of their mental illness.
And I would add to that, they're in more danger of someone harming them than they are to harm somebody else.
And I think those are important factors to help, because as you say, we portray a different image than what the facts are a lot of times when they explore it. You mentioned a little bit, obviously, that sometimes people forget that even just a depression or dealing with things, holiday times is also a very busy season. Here in Emporia locally, we're seeing a lot of transition with a significant job loss. Economic stress can also be a factor for depressions. What kind of tips or services are available for those people that may just need somebody to talk with to help them get through a situation, that it's not needing a long-term but maybe just that help and support?
Well, specific to the holiday issue, I think one of the things we can do is just be realistic about what to expect at the holidays. We tend to have a romanticized or fantasized belief that it's going to be the perfect day of the year and the most special time of the year, to quote a lot of songs that reinforce that message. And so we expect our families are going to suddenly become perfect creatures to be around. Probably not realistic. If we can set our expectations to be more realistic about what can the holidays be about and what probably cannot be, and then to take it in measured and reasonable amounts. We don't have to get everything done. It does not have to be a perfect day in every way. We don't have to have all the presents under the tree in order to have a good day. Just being much more realistic with that, then we tend not to be so upset when it doesn't go that way. Generally speaking, as far as just mental health, is trying to keep some regular routines in your life, trying to get up at the same time, going to bed at the same time, eating meals at regular times, eating healthy meals, getting some exercise throughout the day. All those things that we do to take care of our body are things that also take care of our mind and our mental health. So just being very conscientious to keep some routines in our lives and constantly build up our resources, build up our people that we can talk to, who can be a good support for us.
In an event of a traumatic situation, something like what happened this past weekend in Connecticut or even what happened on Sunday in Topeka, what services, what reaction does the mental health center offer to the community, and how do your services play in to help those directly affected and the community as a whole as it's working through that?
That's a good question. Right now, we work very closely with our Lyon County Emergency Management team. Rick Freevert down at Emergency Management does a wonderful job of organizing our Lyon County community and being prepared for traumatic events or disaster response. Through the state of Kansas, every mental health center is expected or has that expectation of having a response team for disasters. And so ours is included in that, and we have a very strong response team that we've responded to some of the recent local tornadoes. And so we've put that into effect and practiced it. And that would be the same response. And so depending on what that traumatic event was, once we are asked to be a participant in that response, we would arrive and function under that need. And so we just, typically our response is that we're available to talk with people, allow them to tell their story, offer the resources, hook them up to the resources, and then just follow through from there.
Great. We talk a little bit, and obviously discussions happen in situations like this where it becomes a much more wide media attention, and people start automatically pushing it's a mental health issue, and they push that button. Maybe sometimes it's almost for, I don't know if it's a comfort's sake, that they hope that that's the rationale behind it, or the lack of rationale possibly behind the act. But then the discussion starts, maybe we need to fund mental health more. And we've talked a little bit and we chatted, but we've seen over the past 6 to 7 years, funding for mental health in the state of Kansas has decreased significantly, and you're seeing the demands continue at a similar level, but funding and support there decrease. How is the mental health center responding to those cuts, and how are you able to, or what are the impacts of those cuts if they continue throughout the state level, the national level, the local level?
Part of what we're dealing with is we have had I believe a 15% cut in rates, and yet our services continue to grow every year. So trying to do more with less, like most businesses, most agencies, trying to make it work with what we have. We are definitely challenged to try to meet all the needs. We are much more focused on the crisis situation and trying to deal with those as best we can. Preventative care is much more difficult to do when you're not supported for that, unfortunately. But we do try to do some work around that nonetheless with our community, with other agencies, just a network, keep involved.
We have very committed staff, and so I think our main push is to just do our job as efficient as possible, crossing those T's, dotting those I's, and just doing it in a well-manufactured manner so that we can do more with less.
Great. Any final thoughts either about the news as a whole or the services the mental health center is offering that you want to make sure that the viewers of ETV and the EmporiaGazette.com site know?
Well, I would say we might want to spend a little bit of time. A lot of the questions we're getting is how do we support our kids, or how do we support ourselves in how we feel about our kids and where our families are and their environment. What we know is it's kind of the same as preparing for that holiday stress. You want to know your limitations. You want to know, or follow through with your same routines and getting your rest and eating well and exercising and sticking with that. We don't want to glorify it to the kids. It's good to kind of clue them in and let them know what's going on, but they shouldn't be sitting in front of the TV watching the media stream for hours on end, because we certainly don't want them to be fearful of going to school.
Particularly with younger children, it's probably best to not even, if we can, avoid that exposure to a great degree, more on a need-to-know basis. We don't need to traumatize them with news of the media. Reassure them that they are safe. We have ways, and we're going to keep you safe if this is not your trauma. Continue to talk to them. Let them talk as much as they want about how they're feeling. Realize children and adults will process this in different speeds, different rates. So just let them talk about whatever is on their mind, let them ask questions, and try to be honest with them. Also be real careful as an adult or as a parent to gauge your responses so that your anxiety or your upset or your sadness about what's happening is not exacerbating the situation for your children. So trying to keep yourself level and grounded and more factual, but letting kids ask questions, but not being hysterical yourself, because that will create hysteria for your children. So the more neutral you can stay, or more positive you can stay, the better for your kids.
And I would add on to that to expand to everybody in your environment. Anytime we have a traumatic event, you want to pay attention not only to yourself but to those around you, as far as are their behaviors changing, are their patterns changing, are their emotions changing, and just pay attention. You want to look out for yourself, but you also want to look out for your coworkers or your neighbors or your family members. And so if you see some of those changes across a broad spectrum, asking them if they're okay, pointing them to resources that might be there, and just really encouraging them to pay attention to and get the help they might need.
Great. For further information or assistance, how do they contact you guys at the Mental Health Center?
Can reach us anytime at our main phone number, 620-343-2211. After hours, there's an emergency contact number. You call that number, it'll tell you what number to call. Or just call day and night. Or during the day, if you're wanting to get connected with services, we can get you set up for an initial assessment and get you going from there.
Very good. We appreciate you guys taking time out of your busy schedules, especially around the holiday as you're preparing for shortened weeks here with a little bit of a break, hopefully. For coming in and chatting with us today and answering our questions, and good luck with the rest of your year and any efforts you have. And we'll be sure to have you guys back in the future and have you chat more about some of the different services and activities you offer.
Great, thank you.
All right, thank you guys very much. For further information from the Mental Health Center, you can always contact them direct. Colin will be happy to take your phone call and direct you to who needs to answer your question. For our guests, Brian and Amanda, I'm Rob Gilligan with ETV Town Talk. Thanks for tuning in.